This is Radio Caravan, the world news read by Shabnam Modgil. U.S. Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe has said that Russia and Iran have both tried to interfere with the 2020 presidential election. The announcement 2 weeks before the election showed the level of alarm among top U.S. officials that foreign actors were seeking to undermine Americans' confidence in the integrity of the vote and spread misinformation in an attempt to sway its outcome. Google has said this disinformation campaign linked to Iran tried to send 25,000 emails to Gmail accounts. Only 10% of the emails sent to these accounts made it past Google's spam filter. Iranian intelligence responsible for the recent campaign of emails sent to intimidate Florida voters, according to the FBI, adding that Russia was also working to influence the election. Iranian and Russian officials have denied these charges. Billionaire Michael Bloomberg's $100 million investment in Florida to defeat Donald Trump is recasting the presidential contest in the president's must-win state, forcing his campaign to spend big to shore up his position and freeing up Democratic cash to expand the electoral map elsewhere. While the world will be closely watching the U.S. election, some countries will be watching more closely than others. A number of world leaders have a personal stake in the outcome, with their fortunes depending heavily on the success or failure of President Trump. And, of course, perhaps none has so much riding on a Trump victory as Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. President Donald Trump and his Democratic rival Joe Biden meet on the debate stage for the second and final time tonight in Tennessee. The 90-minute primetime meeting comes just 12 days before Election Day. And opinion polls and record early voting returns show millions of Americans who typically don't vote in elections are coming off the sidelines this year. Despite a public health crisis and the subsequent economic hardship, voters have been queuing up to cast an early ballot. The number of Americans who voted early has reached 30.2 million, according to the University of Florida's United States Elections Project. And that number represents more than 1/5 of all votes that were cast in the 2016 election. With less than 2 weeks left until Election Day, former Vice President Joe Biden is in a tied race with President Trump in the reliably red state of Texas. Trump and Biden are tied 47% among likely voters. This compares to a September 24th poll of likely voters in Texas when Trump had 50% and Biden had 45%. Both find themselves in a Texas standoff, setting the stage for a bare-knuckle battle for 38 electoral votes. Former President Obama returned to the campaign trail yesterday, launching a blistering attack on Donald Trump with less than 2 weeks to go before the Republican president's Election Day face-off with the Democratic nominee Joe Biden. Speaking at this drive-in rally in Philadelphia on behalf of Biden, his former vice president, former President Obama offered his fiercest critique yet of his successor, taking aim at Trump's divisive rhetoric and his track record in the Oval Office. Senator Mitt Romney has said he did not cast his vote in the 2020 election for President Trump, the only Republican in the U.S. Senate to vote for Trump's removal from office during this year's impeachment trial. And President Trump is considering firing FBI Director Chris Wray after the election, this according to the Washington Post. The Manhattan federal court hearing of a journalist who has accused Donald Trump of raping her in the 1990s was cancelled abruptly after a government attorney was unable to enter the courthouse due to New York's strict COVID-19 rules. And the number of COVID-19 patients in U.S. hospitals has hit 40,000 for the first time since August. As the nation battles a surge in infections led by Midwest states, hospitals have seen this 36% rise in coronavirus patients over the past 4 weeks, and Midwest hospitals are setting new records every day. Despite the outbreak and spread of the coronavirus at the White House, Donald Trump still insists that, and I quote, "it's going to disappear." To make matters worse, he proclaims, "we have a cure. We have lost 220,000 Americans to the deadly pandemic." NASA's OSIRIS-REx spacecraft crushed rocks and sent rubble flying as it briefly touched an asteroid, a strong indication that samples were collected to return to Earth. Scientists won't know until next week how much was gathered at asteroid Bennu. They want at least a handful of that cosmic rubble. The so-called touch-and-go or tag maneuver was managed by Lockheed Martin Space in Denver, Colorado, and, of course, in a precision operation 200 million miles from Earth. The United States is urging countries that have ratified a UN treaty to ban nuclear weapons to withdraw their support as the pact nears the 50 ratifications needed to trigger its entry into force, which supporters say could happen this week. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said he had been trying for some time to get the deeply divided countries in the Persian Gulf and their backers to step back from possible confrontation and engage in dialogue, so far without success. The Marine Corps has removed a 2-star general from Command of Marine Forces in Europe and Africa based on an investigation into allegations that he used a racial slur during a training event. And the United States Marine Corps helicopter crew chief has accused Australian Special Forces of shooting dead one of the 7 bound Afghan prisoners because there was only space for 6 on the U.S. aircraft due to collect them. At least 8 Afghan civilians killed and 8 others wounded during armed clashes and airstrikes in northern Takhar province last night. Hundreds of Nigerians defied a curfew and returned to the streets of Lagos to demonstrate against police brutality a day after the security forces violently confronted protesters. And a Saudi Arabian governmental body today insisted that executions have been abolished for crimes committed by minors after Human Rights Watch said earlier this week that Saudi prosecutors are seeking the death penalty against a number of young men from the predominantly Shiite eastern region of the kingdom for protest-related crimes they allegedly committed as children. A leading international human rights group today condemned Egypt's execution of 49 people so far this month, some arrested during a deadly crackdown on a mass protest in 2013, and urged authorities in Cairo to grant fair retrials to those on the death row. Turkey's foreign ministry has slammed a joint statement by Greece, Cyprus and Egypt condemning Turkish actions in northern Cyprus and the eastern Mediterranean. Pope Francis endorsed same-sex civil unions for the first time as Pope while being interviewed for the feature-length documentary Francesco, which had its premiere at the Rome Film Festival yesterday. And a record low 59.6% of contacts of positive COVID-19 cases were reached in the latest week. Statistics for England's test and trace scheme showing this morning, with turnaround times for people receiving their results also getting slower. Germany issued travel warnings for popular ski regions in Austria, Italy and Switzerland, aiming to contain the spread of the coronavirus after the country reported more than 10,000 new daily cases for the first time. Spain needs drastic measures to combat an out-of-control new wave of the coronavirus, and Poland's health ministry reported a record over 12,000 coronavirus infections and 168 deaths in 24 hours. Croatia reporting its biggest rise in COVID-19 infections with over 1,500 new cases, nearly half of which were in its capital of Zagreb, where they more than doubled. Ukraine registering a daily record of over 7,000. And the European Union has awarded its top human rights prize to the Belarus opposition movement and its leader for their challenge to the president's long, hardline reign. Thailand's government cancelled a state of emergency it had declared last week for Bangkok in a gesture offered by the embattled prime minister to cool the massive student-led protests seeking democracy reforms. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the World News on Radio Caravan. And the next U.S. administration should strengthen military and economic ties with Taiwan and raise the cost of any Chinese invasion, even as it presses Taipei to bolster its own security. The United States tightened rules on 6 more Chinese media organizations, saying they are propaganda outlets that answer to the state. India is closing in on an agreement with the United States that will give it access to satellite data for better accuracy of missiles and drones as it tries to narrow the gap with the powerful Chinese military. The two sides are expected to announce this pact during the visit next week of U.S. State Secretary Mike Pompeo and Defense Secretary Mark Esper for talks in New Delhi with Indian counterparts. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh will be visiting Sikkim to celebrate the festival of the Dussehra with the troops of the Indian Army posted near the China border. And just weeks after deciding to open up the space sector, the Department of Space has proposed to enable private Indian firms to not just use existing space assets for communication services, but also develop new systems, launch satellites and sell services to foreign customers under its Spacecom Policy 2020. India has successfully carried out the final trial of the Nag anti-tank guided missile at the Pokhran field firing ranges in Rajasthan, and the missile system is now ready for induction into the Indian Army. The inexperienced young guns of both Rajasthan Royals and Sunrisers Hyderabad would like to put their hands up in testing times when both teams square off in a must-win IPL game today. And Sydney and Canberra are set to host the white ball leg of India's tour of Australia after the New South Wales government allowed the visiting team to train during its mandatory quarantine upon arrival. India has decided to restore with immediate effect all existing visas except electronic tourist and medical visas as part of a graded relaxation in visa and travel restrictions for more categories of foreign and Indian nationals. Top doctors in New Delhi reporting a jump in respiratory problems among their residents, and active cases of COVID-19 have fallen below 10%, while the positivity rate of the disease reported below 5%, with a rise of over 55,000 new cases and 702 deaths in the last 24 hours. Prime Minister Modi extended his greetings on the occasion of Durga Puja and said this puja reflects unity and strength of India as well as traditions and culture of Bengal. The federal government has requested the UK government for a third time to send back former Premier and Supreme Leader of the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz Sharif to serve out his sentence in a Pakistani prison, with the letter this time handed over personally to the British High Commissioner in Islamabad. With no let-up in number of COVID-19 cases, the National Command and Operations Centre warned that if people continue to flout health guidelines, it would have no choice but to order closure of services. Again, the numbers stand at 325,480 confirmed cases in Pakistan,
at a campaign rally
due to a lingering cough yesterday following her infection with the coronavirus.
Zimbabwe cricket team star all-rounder Elton Chikumbura said that the visiting outfit is feeling quite comfortable in Pakistan and would put in their maximum to win matches
and 1.1 million deaths. The pandemic shows no sign of slowing down in the United States.
Selection
More than 8.2 million cases and more than 420
including
deaths have been
Zahid
reported.
Mahmood, Danish Aziz and Amir Yamin were being ignored